Hello, everyone. Cyprus was a possession of the British Empire from 1878 until its independence in 1960. During the transfer of power, Britain created a completely different government system based on an extensive and bureaucratic colonial civil service. The implementation of new laws that included the regulation of fabrics and record keeping of imports and exports of fabrics and clothes. This study will examine British policy and regulation of textiles from the start of colonization until the independence of the island, focusing on key periods such as the First and Second World Wars and the anti-colonial struggle through various historical evidence such as photographs, posters, newspapers, and archival material from the municipal archive of Limassol. Thus, the British colonial government used fabrics and textile production as a means of manifesting its political power in Cyprus. This paper aims to shed light on this mostly unexamined aspect of the management of textiles in relation to the power imbalance in colonial Cyprus. Between 1751 and 1878, the island of Cyprus was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. During these 3 centuries of Ottoman domination, textiles became a sign of power, and the Greek Cypriot elites sought to emulate the garments worn at the imperial capital, Constantinople, while the locals wore the traditional garments of Cyprus, inspired by the Ottoman style, called ala turca, made out of the local alaja cotton hand-woven fabric. In 1878, with the Cyprus Convention, the island was handed to the British in exchange for military support against the Russian Empire and an annual tribute. By 1914, the Ottoman Empire had joined Germany in the First World War, and Cyprus was annexed by Great Britain. In 1923, Turkey waived its rights on Cyprus with the Treaty of Lausanne, and in 1825, Cyprus was proclaimed a crown colony until the establishment of the Republic of Cyprus in 1960. The British rule was characterized by rapid social and economic growth in the urban districts. In contrast, there was slow development and extreme poverty in the rural areas. Nonetheless, a new era of westernization dawned in Cyprus. First, the bourgeois adapted their dress to the contemporary European fashions, and by the 1940s, this has started being passed down to the general masses. Through the colonial period, English-speaking newspapers such as the Cyprus Herald, the Times of Cyprus, and Cyprus Mail featured a multitude of articles and advertisements that promoted European fashion trends and helped popularize Western fashion against the traditional Cypriot dress. Consequently, Britain was able to influence its subjects' cultural identity and promote Westernization, as well as encourage them to buy imported fabrics and fashions. This was part of the wider imperial preference system that encouraged trade within the empire as a form of economic protectionism. Unlike the previous Ottoman government that did not have a framework for the existence of municipal councils as legal entities, the British organized municipal councils in all the districts of the island. However, the Ottoman governing system was mostly based around tax collection, which was continued and modified by the British. Additional changes were made in spending funds for creating a basic infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, and ports. In Limassol, the British appointed its first mayor, Christodoulos Karidis, in 1878, who was re-elected until 1885. They also appointed a British governor of the district of Limassol, the first being Falkland Water. Additionally, the colonial government introduced mandatory auditing of the municipal financial accounts, which were later published in the Cyprus Gazette. Most of the income reported by the municipalities in the late 19th century was received through taxes, indicating that the municipalities had a more active role in tax collecting rather than in administration. In 1916, amidst the First World War, the British decided to create the Macedonian Mule Corps, made up of Cypriot mules and muleteers, as a means to carry provisions to support the effort in the Macedonian front. In order to entice the locals to enlist, the government offered, aside from payment and everyday food provisions, the supply of underwear, a harness, and a military uniform. These supplies were supposed to be alluring to the Cypriot villagers who were living in poverty. During the Second World War, the colonial government created various offices, like the Office of the Controller of Supplies in the capital, Nicosia. It was tasked with the implementation of economic policies, rationing, and approving any importations into Cyprus. All imports of clothes were prohibited without a specific license. However, textile goods could be freely imported from within the British Empire. The municipalities had frequent correspondence with the controller of supplies for various matters, including the distribution of textiles. Some of these letters are currently held at the Municipal Archive of Limassol. Parts of the aforementioned laws dealt with the regulation of the prices of various commodities, as well as fabrics. Many of them remained in force even after the war. Such as, an example, is the Defense, Sale of Government Clothing and Other Textiles Order 1946 that specified laws governing approved retail prices for textiles, the issuing of clothing booklets, and approved retailers. Aside from the published laws, the Municipal Archive of Limassol has a variety of files dated to 1943 detailing the organizing structure and correspondence between the various officials and the local suppliers that were involved in the rationing scheme. Although the intended target was to avoid the creation of black markets, these appeared as soon as rationing was implemented, and the price of textiles and other commodities skyrocketed to the dismay of the local population. Market regulations were applied from the first year of British rule, with the supervision of agricultural products and the examination of weights. The municipality additionally applied its market rules over all perishables, including fabrics such as cotton goods and leather. Efforts were made by the colonial government to industrialize and increase the textile production of the island, with cotton becoming one of the main exported items of the island in the 1930s. Among the new offices created was the District Controller of Supplies, Transport and Marketing of the Municipality of Limassol, who applied market controls. A great variety of excellent quality silk, cotton, flax fabrics were manufactured on handlooms, while small factories existed at Yeroskipu for silk and flax. The trend towards Europeanization is reflected through the importation of the sewing machine, which made it possible for local sewers to copy Western fashions. In May 1947, a report titled Report on the Textiles Industry in Cyprus that was issued by the Supplies, Transport and Marketing Department of Cyprus was created by a government-appointed committee with the aims to investigate the possibilities of the textiles industry in Cyprus and to make recommendations for government policy that would encourage proposals for the creation of textile manufacturing facilities. Hence, a submission date for the proposals was placed for the 30th of June 1947 and authorized by the Controller of Supplies, Transport and Marketing, Mr. Taylor. The report detailed the production of various types of textiles in Cyprus, with most of the figures given having been gathered in 1938 before the war. The committee emphasized that these industries would provide skilled, regular work for a larger number of people that were unemployed and at the same time produce wealth for the island instead of what was currently happening. After the war, the Europeanization of the way of dress was evident in the population of the cities. The aspiration of the Greek Cypriots for enosis, the unification with Greece, was already iterated to the British with their arrival in 1878 and continued throughout their presence on the island. The colonial government used this nationalistic feeling in order to entice the Cypriots to participate in both world wars. Cypriots continued their petitions to the British government through political means and finally launched an armed anti-colonial struggle between 1955 and 1959, led by the organization EOGA. At the same time, EOGA encouraged civilians to protest the colonial government through passive resistance, its most popular form being the boycott movement against imported fabrics and clothes and the return to traditional textiles and loom weaving, and the people wore alajetina, traditional cotton dresses. This movement aimed at making a concrete effort at disempowering the colonial government economically with boycotting the consumption of British goods. For curtailing EOGA fighters, Britain mobilized around 40,000 troops and launched a massive counterinsurgency in a futile struggle to retain its colonial possession. Finally, Britain realized that its attempts had proven unsuccessful and costly, and so opted for a political solution, granting Cyprus independence in 1960. Thus, the colonial government did not seek to spend anything further for the development of infrastructure, including the textile industry. With the arrival of the British, the functioning of the administration changed, and new ways of controlling the market in textiles were introduced. During the course of the First and Second World War, the government encouraged the participation of Cypriots and regulated the import and export of textiles. Furthermore, they implemented a policy of rationing fabrics to the locals, which became a point of contested power between the Limassol municipality, the colonial government, and the local tailors. The 1947 report concluded that the industrialization of the Cypriot textile industry will greatly improve the economic conditions of the Cypriot. But after the war, although the government considered following a policy of industrialization due to the anti-colonial struggle and a losing grip on the island, these proposals were not widely followed. For example, in Limassol, there is no evidence of the implementation of the 1947 scheme. Additionally, during the 55-59 anti-colonial struggle, the Cypriots engaged in passive resistance, with boycotts of British textiles as a form of economic pressure against imperialism. Nevertheless, the dressmakers continued to be influenced by European patterns, and the popularity of the European dress was not hindered, even if they were made in a traditional way. In conclusion, the British colonial government empowered their position on the island in two ways, by using textiles. The first one being the bureaucratic and economic control of the local population and import, as well as market regulation and taxation of textiles, while the second being the ideological influence of the local Cypriots by introducing European fashions and the European way of life in the city. Thank you very much.